The Bronze Age collapse, when civilization almost ended. Between roughly 1200 and 1150 BCE, the Mediterranean world entered a period of such profound darkness that entire civilizations simply vanished from the archaeological record. Palaces that had stood for centuries burned to ash in a matter of days. Trade networks that had bound together Egypt, the Near East, and the Aegean for half a millennium collapsed almost simultaneously. Within a single generation, perhaps within a single decade, the Bronze Age world as it had existed for 300 years ceased to be. What makes this collapse so extraordinary, and so haunting, is its sheer speed. There were no gradual declines, no slow fade into post-classical simplicity. Instead, there is a cliff edge. On one side sits the sophisticated, interconnected Bronze Age Mediterranean, a world of writing systems, standing armies, international diplomacy, long-distance maritime trade. On the other side sits something darker, a world where literacy disappeared, where cities shrank to villages, where the accumulated knowledge of centuries seemed to evaporate overnight. Civilizations that we know only through their grandest monuments, through inscriptions boasting of conquest, through temple records and royal decrees, suddenly left no more written words behind. The silence that followed was deafening. For nearly a century, scholars dismissed these extinctions as inevitable fading, the tired decline of old kingdoms. But in recent decades, a more unsettling picture has emerged. This was not natural decline. This was catastrophe. And though we still cannot say with absolute certainty what triggered the collapse, we can trace its footprints across 3 continents, through ash layers and skeletal remains, through abandoned cities and desperate letters scratched by administrators who seemed to sense their world was ending. This is the story of how the ancient Mediterranean came close to obliteration and how we nearly lost the thread of human civilization entirely. The Bronze Age Mediterranean of the 13th century BCE was a world of unprecedented sophistication. Egypt, now nearly 2,000 years into its own history, still commanded vast territories along the Nile and into Nubia. Its great temples at Thebes, today's Luxor, held the wealth and administrative machinery of one of antiquity's most stable empires. The Hittite Empire, based in what is now central Turkey, had grown to rival Egypt in power. Their archives, baked clay tablets found at their capital Hattusa, reveal a bureaucracy as complex as any modern state's. They conducted diplomacy with equal powers, brokered peace treaties, and maintained detailed records of everything from military deployments to the inventory of temple stores. The Mycenaean civilization of Greece, centered in fortified palace complexes on the mainland, had mastered a form of writing and controlled maritime trade throughout the Aegean and beyond. The island of Cyprus thrived as a hub of copper production and trade. The Levantine coast, in what is now Syria and Lebanon, hosted wealthy merchant cities like Ugarit and Sidon, where merchants from multiple cultures negotiated side by side in their bustling harbors. Ugarit alone was home to at least 16 different written languages. It was a cosmopolitan world, interconnected by sea routes that were as vital to these civilizations as digital networks are to ours. This interconnectedness was their greatest glory and, as it would turn out, their greatest vulnerability. What unified them was bronze, the alloy of copper and tin that had defined an entire age. Bronze was money, in a sense. Bronze was weapons. Bronze was prestige. Every major civilization of the Eastern Mediterranean was tied into an elaborate system of tin and copper procurement, smelting, and distribution. Tin, in particular, was the bottleneck. It could be obtained from only a handful of regions, possibly Afghanistan, possibly Cornwall far to the west, possibly sources in Central Asia. Control the tin supply, and you controlled the Bronze Age world. The major kingdoms understood this interdependence, and it had, paradoxically, created a kind of stability. Trade was so profitable, so necessary, that even enemies maintained commercial contact. Egyptian pharaohs and Hittite kings sent each other diplomatic letters that reveal not ancient primitivism but genuine political sophistication, a balance of power mentality that would be recognizable to modern readers. When the Hittite king Muwatalli faced the Egyptian Ramesses II at the Battle of Kadesh around 1274 BCE, the two monarchs eventually negotiated peace rather than fight to extinction. The world had learned that some conflicts were best avoided, and that mutual enrichment through trade was preferable to mutual destruction through war. Then, around 1200 BC, very roughly, for the chronologies of this period remain subject to scholarly debate, something began to go wrong. The first signs were subtle. Records from Egypt's reign of Ramesses III, who ruled in the late 12th century, speak of repeated incursions along Egypt's Mediterranean coast by raiders who called themselves the Sea Peoples. Ramesses III commemorated his victories against these invaders on the walls of his temple at Medinet Habu, depicting fierce naval battles and the capture of foreign soldiers. The Egyptian texts are triumphant, but they also contain an unmistakable note of alarm. These were not isolated raids. These were waves of organized seaborne attacks, coordinated across multiple ethnic groups, targeting the wealthiest and most vulnerable points of the Mediterranean coast. On the same timeline, at the capital of the Hittite Empire, Hattusa, there is archaeological evidence of fire. Intense fire. The palace complex was destroyed around 1180 BCE, and it was never rebuilt. A letter, one of the last written texts recovered from the city, speaks of enemy ships attacking without warning and of famine gripping the land. Lands were moving on, reads one contemporary Egyptian account from this era, and no land stood in its place. The phrasing is eerily vague, yet the desperation in it is unmistakable. Within decades, the great palace at Mycenae in Greece was abandoned and burned. Pylos, another major Mycenaean center, shows signs of violent destruction followed by a fire that baked the clay tablets in its archive, accidentally preserving them. At Ugarit, that cosmopolitan trading hub on the Levantine coast, a final series of letters were scratched in desperation. One message, addressed to the king of Cyprus, reads, "My father, behold, the enemy's ships came. My cities were burned. They did evil things in my country. Does not my father know that all my troops and chariots are in the Hittite land? I am destitute." The writer's distress leaps across nearly 3,000 years. Ugarit itself was destroyed shortly after that letter was written. The city was burned, abandoned, and never resettled. Its libraries, baked by that same destroying fire that preserved Pylos's records, lay buried until archaeologists excavated them in the 20th century. Across the Mediterranean, the pattern repeated: destruction, fire, abandonment. Cyprus's copper production centers were destroyed. The Egyptian delta itself was under assault. Trade routes that had carried goods and ideas for centuries simply ceased to function. Ships that had crossed open water in regular trading expeditions vanished from the historical record. And in their wake came silence. When historians and archaeologists study the centuries following 1200 BCE, they encounter a world profoundly changed. The great palace civilizations were gone. The international diplomatic correspondence that gives us such vivid insight into the Bronze Age Mediterranean ends almost entirely. Writing itself became rare. In Greece, the elegant linear script that scribes had used to record everything from palace inventory to religious dedications was abandoned. For the next 400 years, the Greeks were, effectively, illiterate. They would not develop a new writing system until they adopted and adapted the Phoenician alphabet around 800 BCE. Population collapsed. Archaeological surveys of Greece show that habitation in the centuries after 1200 BCE dropped to perhaps one-tenth of what it had been. Villages shrank to hamlets. Cities became empty shells. Ceramics found in these later settlements are crude compared to what came before, less decorated, less refined, suggesting not artistic choice but loss of skill. Trade networks that had connected continents fragmentally, surviving only on local or regional scales. Cyprus, which had been wealthy and connected, saw its population crash. The Levantine coast lost its great cities. Egypt endured, protected by the Nile and its natural barriers, but contracted into itself, its horizons narrowed, its international influence diminished. What happened? #The Bronze Age Collapse, final section. And in their wake came silence. When historians and archaeologists study the centuries following 1200 BCE, they encounter a world profoundly changed. The great palace civilizations were gone. The international diplomatic correspondence that gives us such vivid insight into the Bronze Age Mediterranean ends almost entirely. Writing itself became rare. In Greece, the elegant linear script that scribes had used to record everything from palace inventory to religious dedications was abandoned. For the next 400 years, the Greeks were, effectively, illiterate. They would not develop a new writing system until they adopted and adapted the Phoenician alphabet around 800 BCE. Population collapsed. Archaeological surveys of Greece show that habitation in the centuries after 1200 BCE dropped to perhaps one-tenth of what it had been. Villages shrank to hamlets. Cities became empty shells. Ceramics found in these later settlements are crude compared to what came before, less decorated, less refined, suggesting not artistic choice but loss of skill and knowledge surrendered to survival. Trade networks that had connected continents fragmented, surviving only on local or regional scales. Cyprus, which had been wealthy and connected, saw its population crash. The Levantine coast lost its great cities. Egypt endured, protected by the Nile and its natural barriers, but contracted into itself, its horizons narrowed, its international influence diminished. What happened? That question has haunted scholars for over a century. And the truth is, we still do not have a simple answer. There was no single catastrophe. There was no one enemy. Instead, what unfolded across the late 13th and 12th centuries BCE was a perfect storm, a convergence of pressures so severe that no system, however advanced, could weather them all at once. Some scholars point to climate. In recent decades, researchers studying ice cores, tree rings, and sediment layers have detected evidence of dramatic cooling and drought in the eastern Mediterranean around 1200 BCE. Crops would have failed. Harvests would have been meager. Populations dependent on predictable agriculture would have faced genuine starvation. Desperate people move. They raid. They destabilize. And they demand resources their governments suddenly cannot provide. Others emphasize invasion and the movements of displaced peoples. The sea peoples, whoever they truly were, emerge from the historical record as both symptom and accelerant. They may have been refugees themselves, driven from their homes by the very climate crises that were destabilizing the great civilizations. Or they may have been opportunists who saw weakness and exploited it. The distinction hardly matters. What matters is that when the Mycenaean palace administrators could no longer guarantee safety, when trade routes became dangerous, when the next shipment of tin or grain could not be relied upon, the entire apparatus of Bronze Age civilization began to crack. Then there was the question of complexity itself. These civilizations were marvels of organization, but organization, we now understand, requires constant energy to maintain. Palaces needed to feed their bureaucrats and soldiers. Armies needed to be paid and supplied. Artisans needed raw materials from far away. When you build a system of such elaborate interdependence, when you create chains of supply and hierarchy so intricate that no part can stand alone, you have created something remarkably fragile. You have created something that works brilliantly until it doesn't. The Mycenaean palatial system had endured for centuries, but it was already showing signs of strain in the 13th century BCE. There is evidence of conflict among the palace centers themselves, of economic competition, of resources stretched thin. When external pressures arrived, drought, invasion, migration, the system did not bend. It shattered. And what is perhaps most unsettling is how quickly it happened. Within perhaps 2 generations, the world that had produced the great palace civilizations was functionally gone. The palaces burned. The scribes were no longer needed. The shipwrights who had built the great trading vessels had no trade. The metalworkers found no one buying bronze. The merchant princes vanished. The knowledge that had been carefully preserved in palace archives was lost when those archives burned, or when the scribes who might have maintained them could no longer be fed. What followed was what historians have sometimes called the Dark Ages, not because nothing happened, but because so little light reaches us from that time. The historical record grows sparse. Writing disappears. We know only that people survived, that slowly, over centuries, new cultures emerged. The Greeks began again, without writing, without the palace systems, without the international connections that had defined their Bronze Age. They became simpler, smaller, more local. And from that simplicity, eventually, something new would grow, the polis, the city-state, the foundation of classical Greece. But that transformation lay centuries ahead. In the immediate aftermath of the collapse, there was only the struggle to endure. No one was recording their thoughts. No one was writing about what had been lost, because the people who knew how to write had likely dispersed or perished. The world did not know it had ended a civilization. It only knew that things had become harder, more uncertain, more desperate. And this is perhaps the deepest lesson the Bronze Age collapse offers us across the gulf of 3,000 years. These were not primitive people living in primitive times. They built monumental architecture. They maintained diplomatic correspondence. They produced art of astonishing sophistication. They created systems of organization and trade that linked continents. They believed, surely, that what they had built would endure. But complexity and sophistication are not the same as permanence. A system can be magnificent and still fragile. A civilization can seem eternal right up until the moment it is not. When multiple stresses converge, environmental, military, economic, social, even the most advanced societies of their age can come apart with shocking speed. The people living through it do not typically recognize it as a collapse. They experience it as a slow erosion, a gradual dimming, a world that works a little less well year by year, until one day, looking back, they realize the world they knew is gone. The Bronze Age Mediterranean had not simply faded. It had been transformed, broken down, redistributed. Those sophisticated systems that had taken centuries to build were dismantled in decades. The people who had lived within them scattered, adapted, survived in smaller ways, in simpler communities, carrying with them only fragments of what had been lost. Somewhere in the ashes of those burned palaces lay the seeds of new worlds. Somewhere in the silence of the abandoned trade routes, new stories were beginning. But in the moment, in the 12th century BCE, when a merchant could not sail safely, when a scribe could not find employment, when the supply chains that held the world together had finally, completely failed, there was only the unknown. Only the necessity of beginning again. The Bronze Age had ended. And from its ending, another world would slowly, patiently, be born.